Holy City Center Radio. It is episode 199, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Wednesday, December 6th, 2023. Welcome back to the show. I hope your week is going well so far. Nothing to complain about here. Also, nothing exciting to report since the last podcast as far as what I've been up to. Same old, just hard at work. You know, working on all this Holy City Center stuff, whether it's the website, this podcast, or the bigger project that I keep alluding to. What I can tell you about the bigger project is that Holy City Center is now part of a small network, but we're looking to grow of local, whether it's blogs, websites, whatever you want to classify them as they all have a different feel. Right now, there's just a few websites under the umbrella, and we'll be looking to expand. I'll be able to give you more and more details on that later. But Holy City Center, not going anywhere. Same name, same website, same stuff. The only difference is, is that, for instance, the website just had a nice upgrade. I think it looks better, which is great. So just busy working on all that stuff. And again, we'll have plenty more to share in the future. All right. So with nothing really in personal life or really Holy City Center land to report, let's just jump into the news. Months after a Folly Beach bride was killed by an alleged drunken driver, you, of course, remember this whole story, I am sure. There's hard to find bright spots in stories like these, and there very rarely is even a small thing to take away. And unfortunately, it seems like this situation is getting worse, not better, and not even a tiny bit. Unfortunately, a rift has apparently started between the groom who survived that accident and his mother-in-law. How much, has this rift grown? Well, it's actually devolved into a legal battle over control of the deceased bride's assets. So just as a quick recap, in case you all don't remember, a gentleman by the name of Eric Hutchinson and a woman by the name of Samantha Miller exchanged vows back on April 28th of this year. The ceremony was held on Folly Beach, right on the beach, looking over the Atlantic Ocean. Supposed to be a magical day. Hundreds of family and friends attended, and unfortunately that celebration turned to tragedy later that evening. The newlyweds left their nighttime wedding reception just about 10 p.m. They were in a golf cart type vehicle, and they were accompanied by two of the groom's family members. A young woman driving a Toyota Camry 40 miles over the speed limit on East Ashley Avenue out on Folly Beach crashed into the rear of that vehicle. It ultimately killed the 34-year-old bride. Again, her name was Samantha Miller, and caused serious injuries to Hutchinson, who was the groom, and there was also injuries to the two other occupants in the vehicle. Now, Hutchinson himself was hospitalized with some pretty significant injuries. He had a brain injury as well as broken bones that ended up requiring 2 reconstructive surgeries. The driver, Jamie Komorowski, we've talked about this situation a few times, so that name may sound familiar. She is still in jail awaiting a trial date. She's been charged with multiple crimes in that accident, and we'll of course update on how that all goes. So unfortunately, we have this horrific accident, and now it seems there's some squabbling, whatever you want to call it, between the husband and his mother-in-law. So the bride's mother, Lisa Miller, is contesting the validity of her daughter's hours-old marriage to Hutchinson and has petitioned a probate judge to remove him as the personal representative of his wife's estate, citing, quote, issues of potential fraud, end quote, and conflicts of interest. So Miller's attorney has filed, then withdrawn, and refiled a motion to intervene in a wrongful death lawsuit that was filed by Hutchinson on behalf of his deceased wife's estate in Charleston County's Court of Common Pleas. Samantha Miller's estate is poised to get a pretty large settlement in a wrongful death lawsuit, which names several local bars that have been accused of serving Jamie Komorowski beyond the point of intoxication. We've also talked about the rising insurance rates of businesses here in the city area, whether it's Charleston or greater Charleston area, even if they've never had a settlement, what they have to carry for insurance for these types of potential incidents is insane, and forcing some businesses to close. And this is kind of representing why. Not that they shouldn't be held responsible in certain cases if someone was overserved and was clearly too intoxicated, and we've talked about that a little bit. But this is an example that anytime there's an accident of this kind, a lot of times you'll see a wrongful death lawsuit, or even if death doesn't occur, maybe someone's injured, whatever it may be. We're seeing more and more lawyers going after establishments, even if those establishments I don't know the timeline, and we'll learn that in the court case, but there's multiple establishments that are listed here. And I've heard of other cases where, for instance, a bar was included in one of these wrongful death lawsuits, or actually, I don't even think, no, there was no death involved. Excuse me. It was just an injury. One of the bars, closed down by midnight. They were the first stop for the person, who caused an accident later in the evening. That accident happened well after, I think it was like 2 a.m. It might have even been a little after that. Not just well after this bar had closed. This person had left that bar well before midnight. Without getting into too many more details, the point I'm trying to get across is when that person left that bar, they were not, at a point that they were so intoxicated that that business should be held accountable. But there is no really determination of that unless you bring it to court. And a lot of these businesses would rather just settle. So it's a very complicated and confusing thing. But the end result is that there's a decent amount of money that can come out of these things, especially since many businesses would rather just settle than go to court and have their business's name, coming up in these stories about car accidents and deaths and things like that. So there's a potentially a pretty good chunk of change that is going to be assigned to her estate. So apparently, according to the Post and Courier's reporting, they looked at these court documents, and it indicates that the lawsuit is pretty close to nearing a settlement. So that's another reason we might be seeing some of these disagreements between the two parties right now. Now, Hutchinson, that's the groom, his attorneys have called Lisa Miller's motion to intervene, quote, morally questionable, end quote, and another quote, legally baseless, end quote. That was in a December 1st memo of opposition. Now, South Carolina law states that when a married person dies without a will, their spouse is entitled to their money and property and has priority in serving as personal representative of their estate. Seems pretty clear cut. Yeah, their marriage was only a few hours old, but they were married, and, that would seem to be pretty clear cut. Now, Hutchinson's attorneys argue that Lisa Miller's filings are intended to scuttle a financial settlement between Hutchinson and several Folly Beach bars in order to obtain money that they say the mother-in-law in this case has no legal right to, despite it being her daughter. They're arguing that based on the law, she doesn't even have a right to this money. So why is she trying to intervene? In addition to that, they claim that Eric has offered her some of that money that, even though by law it seems she is not legally entitled to. So they said, quote, Eric has been more than generous with Lisa Miller, offering her half of the money, and she has repaid him by threatening to bring a frivolous challenge to the validity of his marriage to Sam, end quote. That was one of his attorneys, Patrick Wooten, talking to the Post and Courier. So their argument is, by law, he gets 100%. He, based on South Carolina law, married person dies, doesn't have a will, which apparently she did not. The spouse is entitled to their money and property. So all of that, they are arguing, should go to the husband, Eric. However, they also said, despite that, Eric has offered half of that money to Lisa Miller, his mother-in-law. Now, Miller, for her part, told the Post and Courier that her daughter would have wanted her and Hutchinson to work together as equal partners in the wake of her death, but that Hutchinson's attorneys have, what she says, basically saying she's been sidelined. So, there's a lot of, this side says one thing, that side says the other, and, I'm basing, this on a Post and Courier article. I'm sure they looked into the law and wouldn't have reported, if the law didn't state that, they wouldn't have reported that. Obviously, there could be some understandable questions. what makes a marriage quote unquote legal? Uh, does paperwork have to be filed by a certain time frame? Uh, when it comes to this, it was just a few hours old, and they had a ceremony. Is that good enough, or who knows? I'm sure there's questions like that, so I get it. What I don't understand is that the mother-in-law is saying that her daughter would have wanted her and the husband to work together as equal partners. Well, wouldn't equal partners split any money 50-50? It would seem right, and that's what apparently was offered to her. So that part I don't really get. My only guess would be based on that is, although yes, he might have offered 50-50, she wants her and her lawyers maybe to be more involved and not just him and his lawyers. Maybe she feels they should work together more. So, yes, great. 50%, would that be equal partners like she wanted, but she wants to be more involved? That would be my guess, or maybe that's what her lawyers want her to be more involved, because maybe they think, oh, we can get more money or we can do better for everyone. So it's just these situations are terrible. You hate to hear this stuff where a tragedy is just going to potentially drive, these two parties permanently apart. There may be some disagreements when it comes to these legal things, and people get over it and move on. But it really stinks to see it kind of devolving into this. And, who knows how much that's them having separate lawyers and lawyers getting in their ear, and who knows, but just a sad situation overall. And, I'll certainly update you as we get more news coming in on this story. A video of body camera footage that the Charleston County Sheriff's Office released shows a fired deputy punching a suspect 9 times, which ultimately caused him to briefly lose consciousness, and this all happened during an October arrest. So after a car chase where speeds got up to over 100 miles per hour, turned into a pursuit on foot, and then this now fired former officer James Henry Carter III rounded a corner to find the suspect, whose name is Richard Duncan, crouching against a mobile home. So the officer, Carter, a former officer, runs up to Duncan, yelling at him to get down, and immediately punches him in the head. At the time, he was crouched down and facing the officer. He did not appear to me in the video, which I've seen, and you can see via the link in the show notes, that he was gesturing, nothing. He just was crouched down. It didn't even look like he had his hands up or anything to try to fight or defend himself. And then bam, just punched right in the face by the officer. Now, that punch was used in concert, punch and then to force him down to the ground. And then once he was on the ground, he was punched 8 more times, all in the face in pretty quick succession. And again, you can see this all in the video. You don't have to take my word for it. So there's that, which isn't good. And the officer is white. The suspect is black. So obviously there's going to be questions about that. But what has really caught the attention, not saying that this violence that the officer demonstrated shouldn't have caught attention on its own, but what is something that has really kind of raised the profile of this is that on that video, some believe the officer used a racial slur. I listened to the video. It's tough. It does sort of sound like he might have, but it also sounds like maybe he didn't. It's almost like if I had known the word I was listening for, would I have caught it? Obviously, the officers' attorneys are arguing he did not use the racial slur, whereas the suspect's lawyers are saying it's clear as day, and he's surprised. His lawyer is Marvin Pendarvis, who is also serving as a state representative. It says it's so clear to him that he's surprised that there's any question about it. Again, I listened to it on my laptop, not like earbuds, I turned it up pretty loud. I can't tell. I really can't. I wouldn't be surprised either way. You can be the judge yourself, though. Go check out the video and see what you think. So there's that side to it. But again, let's go back to what we do know, just because it's clear in the video. So after Duncan is handcuffed, they finally kind of pick him up and he's being put into the deputy's patrol vehicle. The officer Carter then asks him if he enjoyed the nap, acknowledging that the man had indeed lost consciousness from the beating, which, again, like, come on, man, why? Like, of all things, no, that's not, again, not the most important thing that happened here. Obviously, the actual physical violence is the more important part, but just shows that he's aware of what occurred in this instance. So, according to Pendarvis, which again is the suspect's lawyer, that the footage is what he says is one of the most egregious examples of excessive force that he has personally witnessed in law enforcement, short of someone actually dying. He said this during a December 4th press conference. So, meanwhile, the sheriff's office, fired this deputy, as I mentioned. Sheriff Kristen Graziano reiterated in a December 4th news release that she sent out that the sheriff's office has a zero tolerance policy for behavior like this. So, sheriff's office fired him. They're in agreement. The lawyer obviously is in agreement that there was just no need for that amount of force. You know, we've talked about this a million times with excessive force with police, where they do have to make split-second decisions, and sometimes you can kind of sort of get, with emotions running high, how certain decisions are made. Um, and maybe if it was that single punch to put him down, I don't personally think it was necessary. But, you're not there. Sometimes you wonder, am I overreacting? But that wasn't just what happened. It was the totality of it all. After he was on the ground, face down, and didn't appear to be resisting. Not that resisting necessitates being punched rapidly in the head 8 times over, enough to knock you unconscious. It just makes it even more clear that it was unnecessary. Now, the officer in the video, says that the suspect was like reaching towards his waistband, and so he didn't know, did he have a gun or not? Turns out he did not. And that's why, he kind of reacted the way he did. We hear that a lot, especially with shootings of suspects. Like, oh, well, it seemed like they were reaching for their waistband. It seems like that was a get out of jail free card for police for a long, long time. Oh, well, he's reaching for his waistband, so I don't know. Maybe he had a gun. I had to take the necessary precautions and shoot the person. And that, as we've seen over the last few years, that's not really cutting it anymore. With the advent of video, body cameras and things, we're starting to see the fuller picture and not just one side, as people are usually not willing to believe someone who's been accused of a crime, even though, innocent until proven guilty, all that. A lot of us would have in the past just taken the police's word for things. So thank goodness for body cameras that have been able to, when they're not mysteriously turned off or not functioning in some situations, we're able to see the full picture. So you'll hear more about the story. Again, I think the excessive force was clear. There was no need for it, and that should have made this an important story that should have been something you've seen and heard about. But I think it was that potential of using a racial slur that really took it to that next level, because it then adds a for sure racial component to it if there wasn't already. So in any event, you'll probably hear more about this story. I encourage you, although it is, you will be seeing a man get punched. It's not pleasant. I wouldn't say graphic in the sense of there's no blood or visible injury or, anything like that. But it still is violence, and some may be uncomfortable seeing that, but you can watch the video yourself. There's also some, language in there as well, besides the potential racial slur. There's some swearing and things as well. So just keep that in mind if you do go check it out, whether it's for your own, well-being of seeing something like that, or, you have children and things. But definitely, if you want to learn more, even just to read the article, I encourage you to do so. Again, the link is in the show notes. Last story, we'll hit this one pretty quickly. After nearly 5 years of having a building permit cap, the town of Mount Pleasant will vote on whether to extend that cap for another 5 years. Town officials say that the cap is necessary to control growth in that city. The year before the cap, Mount Pleasant saw over 1,400 new houses, apartments, and townhomes built. And even though obviously growth is generally encouraged, more people in your town means more people paying taxes and supporting local businesses, and it can make for a thriving community, of course. Town council members are saying that yes, growth is great, but we need to control it to make sure we can keep up with it. In 2019, a building permit cap was implemented, meaning that only 600 new dwellings in Mount Pleasant could be built each year. So before that cap, they had 1,400. They were able to drop that down to 600. That permanent cap, or I'm sorry, that permit cap was set for 5 years, ending in 2024. However, because of the continued growth Mount Pleasant is still experiencing, the town is proposing the cap be extended until 2029. Now, if you're unclear, one of the reasons it's good to control growth is it gives the city a greater chance to kind of catch up with the amount of people in their town for things like infrastructure, especially when it comes to like traffic control and public safety. If you have an influx of a ton of people, perhaps police, fire departments, or any other emergency personnel may not be able to operate as effectively because they haven't grown with the city's growth, if that makes sense. So they're just trying to maintain a quality of life that they believe, they're doing a pretty good job of now, that might see a downward spiral if there's just too many people coming in that they can't support. So that's the thought process behind it. Town council is set to vote on that cap extension on December 11th. So that will do it for this edition of Holy City Center Radio. Thank you so much for joining me. I will be back on Friday with the last episode of the week. That will be episode 200. Can't believe it. I can't believe I've done 199 of these. And that's not counting ones I probably did and we had to scrap because errors or, software problems or whatever. There's only a couple of those that have ever happened, but still. So technically it's been over 200. It also did like a test episode, but for all intents and purposes, we haven't quite hit that yet. But I appreciate all of you who have listened, whether it's one or all 199 so far. I really appreciate it. Big thank you to Lindsay Marie Collins, who has been involved in almost all of those. Her company, LMC Sound System, sure has, as they produce each and every episode. And thank you to Tyler Boone, whose music you've heard since episode 1. I really appreciate that we've been able to use his tunes in each and every episode. I'll catch y'all on Friday. Until then, good night and good luck.